All right, today we're going to dive into the sprawling, kind of tangled, and totally fascinating career of one of indie rock's most important figures, Lou Barlow. And we're going to map it out in a pretty unique way. I want you to think of his whole story as a single, complex organism, a creative tree, one that's been shaped by some serious conflict, a ton of new growth, and a reconciliation nobody saw coming. And this is the perfect place to start, because this quote, it absolutely nails the heart of Lou Barlow's music. It's just so raw, so confessional. It feels incredibly personal. And you'll see, throughout his entire career, it doesn't matter if he's screaming into a distorted mic or whispering into a 4-track recorder, that intimate, diary-like quality is always, always there.
Okay, so every tree has a trunk, right? The main foundation. For Lou Barlow, that trunk was, without a doubt, the legendary band Dinosaur Jr. This is where it all started, where the seeds of both his unique sound and his biggest creative conflict were planted.
So yeah, it all kicks off in high school. But by 1984, Dinosaur Jr. was already on its way to becoming a pillar of American indie rock. I mean, look at that timeline. It was a super fast evolution. But that laboratory of genial frictions, as one writer called it, started to get really imbalanced, really fast. The same tension that made their music so electric also made the band totally unstable, leading, of course, to that huge fracture in 1989.
Now this slide, this really lays out the core problem perfectly. On one side, you had J Masses, this kind of introverted genius creating these massive sonic storms. And on the other, you had Lou Barlow, the expressive, emotional core who was just trying to find a little space to breathe inside that storm. It was a classic clash of personalities and creative styles, and, looking back, it was almost destined to break.
And break it did, in one of the most brutal ways you can imagine. This wasn't some big, dramatic band meeting. Nope. Masses just told Barlow the band was over. And then he just kept going with a new bassist. It wasn't just a firing. It felt like an erasure. A really deep, personal betrayal that would just echo for decades.
And that's not an exaggeration at all. This event truly became the central trauma, the nuclear wound that would end up fueling so much of his future art. He would literally spend years and years writing songs about this one rejection, processing it all through his music.
But here's where the story gets really interesting. From this incredibly deep wound, something amazing happened. A whole creative forest began to grow. See, once he was kicked out of the main trunk, Barlow just started branching out in every possible direction, creating this whole new ecosystem for his music. The first, and maybe most important new branch, was Sebadoh. This project pretty much became his new trunk. If Dinosaur Jr. was all about control and sonic perfection, Sebadoh was the complete opposite. It was total emotional liberation, raw, messy, recorded on cheap tapes, and just brutally honest. It pretty much defined the entire lo-fi, do-it-yourself indie scene in the 90s.
And if Sebadoh was the new trunk, you could think of Sentridoh as the exposed root system. This wasn't really a band. It was more like his musical subconscious, just a continuous, unfiltered stream of consciousness recorded at home. You've got whispers, half-finished ideas, little fragments. It was the most direct line you could get into his creative mind.
And this just brilliantly illustrates his incredible range. Just when you think you've got him pegged as the spiritual father of lo-fi, he co-founds the Folk Implosion, which was his whole other thing, a project exploring minimalist grooves, shy electronics, and surprisingly, a real pop sensibility.
And in this beautiful, ironic twist, this experimental side project is what gave Barlow his biggest commercial hit. Natural One became a massive success. It was this wild moment of mainstream recognition for an artist who, had up to that point, built his entire career on being fiercely independent and almost anti-star. So after all these years of forging his own path, building this entire forest of his own, the story takes a turn that, honestly, absolutely no one saw coming. 16 years. Just let that number sink in for a second. 16 years of separate lives, very public feuds, and so many songs written about the pain of that original split. For all intents and purposes, that bridge was completely burned. Which, brings us to the central question of this whole story. After a trauma that literally defined an artist's career, after 16 years of distance, is reconciliation even on the table? Is it possible? And the answer, astonishingly, was yes. In 2005, the impossible happened. The original trio got back together. And look, this wasn't some quick cash grab nostalgia tour. Sources describe it as a real, therapeutic reconciliation.
They met as adults, they talked through the past, and they decided to give it another shot.
And just look at this timeline. The reunion wasn't a one-off thing. It was structural, it was lasting. Starting with Beyond in 2007, they released this string of amazing, critically acclaimed albums over the next decade and a half. It proved that the old magic was definitely still there, but now it was tempered with maturity and a whole new sense of balance.
This quote just perfectly captures that new dynamic. Barlow wasn't fighting for space anymore, not at all. He was a full creative partner, and his songs became these incredible moments of vulnerability, these emotional windows carved directly into J Mass's signature wall of sound.
So why does this reunion matter so much in the story of his creative tree? Well, because it completes a kind of psychological cycle that is incredibly rare in music. Or, in life for that matter.
First off, it basically rehabilitated the original trauma. He came back as an equal, a totally established artist in his own right. Second, it rebalanced the whole band's identity, creating a much more mature and dynamic sound. And most profoundly, it closed the loop. The artist who turned rejection into fuel returned to the source of that rejection and helped rebuild it.
This table is a really great way to capture his entire creative identity. See, unlike most artists who have one main project, Barlow truly lives in 3 distinct creative homes. Dinosaur Jr. is that conflicted family home, Sebadoh is the home he built for himself, where he's in charge, and Sentridoh, that's his inner sanctum, his private diary.
And this right here is the legacy of that incredible tree. He's the spiritual father of lo-fi, the poet of fragility and indie rock, and a living testament to the power of turning pain into art. But maybe, just maybe, his most unique legacy is being the guy who returned to the very house that kicked him out and helped make it stronger than it ever was before.
Which leaves us with this one last thought to chew on. Lou Barlow's career is a powerful case study for both sides of that coin. So, what do you think? Does the greatest art come from the friction and the conflict, or does it come from the peace that follows reconciliation? His story seems to suggest that the real answer might just be both.